I'm Connor Holt, and welcome to the very first episode of the new series that I'm going to be doing for the next 7 months. It's called Forgotten Oscar Films, and I'm very excited. I took a week off because of the whole Oscar thing, but I'm back now. I hope you guys enjoyed the Oscars, but if you don't know, you're thinking, maybe this channel's dead, maybe the Oscars are over. Now, I'm going to just wait until the next season. That's not true. This channel is, a full year channel. Before I did some film analysis, that will continue as well, but this new series that I'm going to be doing is trying to incorporate some of my film analysis sort of love with also being, a fan of the Oscars. So this new series is called Forgotten Oscar Films. I'm going to be looking at a movie that was nominated for Best Picture, could either win or not, that I'd never even heard of. And I want to look and see why was it sort of one of the best movies of the year? Why do people consider it great? Why doesn't it hold up? Why have I never heard of it? Why hasn't it been in the film conversation? Yet at the time was so influential. And starting from the year 1988 and then working backwards, there's a lot of sort of films that I've never heard of, maybe you've never heard of as well. Maybe, I'm too young, I haven't heard a lot of these films, but I think there's some films each year that are nominated for Best Picture that, you forget about or you don't remember, even sort of, recently. There's certain movies that just don't stay in the film conversation that are awards plays, and then there's sort of well-done dramas, they make a good amount of money, and they're forgotten. So I want to explore why they're forgotten, but also give maybe these films another go at it again and see whether they were one of the best movies of the year or whether they deserve to be Oscars, and to see maybe some movies I haven't seen before that I really enjoyed. And in this first episode, I'm going to be doing Mississippi Burning. Now, it's just the structure, the format of the show is going to change and evolve. I'd love to hear your comments. Give me some feedback on what you think is going to happen. I'm trying to work it incorporate some maybe the screen elements into it. I'm trying to find my footing, but as of right now, I'm probably going to keep it similar to the Old on Old, if you're familiar with that series last year, that kind of format where I'm going to talk about the historical context. Of course, I'm not alive during any of these moments, so I'm going to be talking about sort of research and understanding the Oscar landscape. So from an Oscar sort of fan, you can understand sort of Oscar history, but also sort of have some critical film analysis and give my thoughts on the film, and then also answer the central question as to just why are we not talking about it today? Maybe you've heard these movies and you're like, what do you mean this is a film that I love? That's the thing about this series, it's going to be objective. But I'm looking at, if you look at some of the big years, some of the best movies of all time, or some of the most classic sort of big blockbusters, they were never really, nominated for Best Picture a lot of times. Or sometimes they didn't even win. Even some of the best movies of all time, things like Citizen Kane, 2001: Space Odyssey, these sort of classic movies that people held, high in such such high regard, sometimes aren't even nominated at the Oscars. So I want to go back and see what they were nominated over, and I'm not going to try to compare them like, oh, well, this should have been nominated. I'm just going to compare the films on their own and see whether or not they're good movies, or if they hold up, or if they're a product of their time. So starting off with a little bit of the history of the Oscar landscape at the time of 1988. And just for record, I'm going to be talking about not the Academy Award years, but the films nominated. So Mississippi Burning came out in 1988. Technically, the awards were like February 89, but I'm just going to refer to it as the 88 Oscars because it's the 88 films. And this one, I thought was a great sort of parallel starting point because Mississippi Burning, similarly to Green Book, had some controversy. It was still behind by its producers and its writers, but people like Martin Luther King Jr.'s wife, Spike Lee, and sort of a lot of the black community and civil rights community actually came out against it, saying that this is a black story and it's been told by this sort of white perspective, and it's a white savior movie. That was a common criticism, and that it was a poorly done movie. But the Academy felt differently. It was nominated for 7 Oscars, I believe winning 1 or 2, I think just 1 actually for art direction, although it was nominated for Best Picture and Best Cinematography. However, at the time, sort of when I was doing my research, it was seen as this is going to be the big thing, this is going to be the Oscar winner, this is going to go through it, and then the controversy actually knocked it down a few pegs, and then it ended up not doing it as well as people thought. Despite that, it still got 7 Oscar nominations, and is sort of a landmark film, I think, in Willem Dafoe's career, and sort of a peak Willem Dafoe performance, as well as Gene Hackman as sort of I wouldn't say a career revival, but in the later part of his career, I'd say, before sort of his turn in, say, something like The Royal Tenenbaums or something like that. But speaking of the controversy, let's just transition over into my thoughts of the film. And I want to tackle the controversy head on. The controversy sort of being that, from the black community at the time, that even at the time, this is not even by today's standards, that it was a white savior movie, that, sort of, which the definition I would interpret it to be sort of a white man coming into, say, another minority's story, and either saving them or showing them the right way, or making them the main character, even though the real story is of the community, and they're sort of trying to make it accessible for people. I think that's the thing that Hollywood has done before. I think these movies do exist. I'm not a fan of these movies. However, I kind of see both sides of the argument personally. I obviously want to start off by saying I'm a white guy. I'm not an African American, so I don't have that perspective. But I do have a perspective, and I do think that my voice still needs to be heard and respected, because I do believe actually everyone's voice should at least be heard at least once. That's not necessarily respected, but at least sort of voiced. I'm a believer of that. But the way I see it is that, for me, I thought that the film actually could have been better with, say, a more prominent or even a black protagonist. I think that in the way the film sort of portrays it, in a lot of ways, treats the black community as a sort of amalgamous group with no distinguishing features except for their faith. There's not really sort of a central figure of the black community. It's just sort of the community at the whole, or say maybe the white community of the town has more distinguishing sort of figures, more recognizable or sort of more prominent in terms of the characters they have. So I think the actual film could have been a little bit better if it had that. But I just do think that this film has some really good intentions, but I also don't think, I do take some umbrage with the idea that it's a white savior movie, because I don't think it actually follows that kind of format, and I don't think that's the story that's being told. I think, maybe you want to hear the story of this black community, and yes, but maybe that's a different movie. I mean, this movie is about two white FBI agents who are coming in, and actually the way I interpreted it and why I saw it was that seeing how much wrong they're doing. It's not saying that they're saving and they're all great and that they're saving these people from their problems and they're going against the KKK. It's actually about I think these two FBI agents with good intentions, but just go about it the wrong way and try to help but actually make the situation much worse. And we see that time and time again with Agent Ward. I think Willem Dafoe's character, I really think he wants to do good, and he really has good intentions, and he doesn't like these kinds of people, the Klansmen, and wants to sort of help, but he goes about it the wrong way with getting all the FBI people and making it a news thing. But then even they constantly sort of confront this issue of saying, like, we've only made it worse. The only reason we're here is because it was these civil rights leaders, and a couple of them were Jewish. If it was just sort of some three local black men, the FBI probably wouldn't be getting involved in here, because it was a civil rights leader, or members, that they're here. They tackle these issues as to sort of the ethics. They wouldn't be here if it were somewhere else. That's I thought a really poignant thing. Sort of that's for politics of the situation, the media, sort of the PR kind of aspect of it. The idea that they make everything worse, that they're not helping in a lot of ways, that they have good intentions, but it's largely a failed operation, I thought was really interesting. I also think that, so I just think that there's clear tensions in the film, whether it be, well, we'll get to that later in terms of the thoughts, but in terms of the controversy, yes, I agree that there's actually some, you would say, amalgamation in a lot of ways in terms of the black community and how they're represented, but I do think that the character wanted to help and wanted to do good, and I disagree that it was a white savior movie, but at the end of the day, that's just my opinion. Really, more, that's out of the way, sort of, I think that. I do want to get into some of the other aspects of the film. The idea that it is a thriller, this is a story about these two FBI agents, and as a thriller, it's really well compellingly crafted. The tension is one of the standouts of the movie. Once we get there, we very clearly understand the tension of the town, and then that keeps us on the edge of our seat and keeps us interested throughout the rest of the film. So we understand that the community, just through the actions, right? Agent Ward at the beginning tries to make some peace, and he sort of goes to the colored section of the restaurant and talks to them, and then he doesn't say anything. The man doesn't rat on all these white people, or you would say he just leaves and doesn't want to talk to them. But that it was a couple days later or a day later, they see him getting thrown from the side of a car because he got beat up. So we see some direct consequences of these actions, that there's a way of things in this town, and you do not mess that, and there's some real power going on here, and the sort of sheriff is linked with that, and sort of immediately the ignorance and sort of the pig sort of nature, you would say, of how the film depicts the sheriff, and because he's connected eventually with the Klan. and sort of the underpinnings there, and how it's sort of the Ku Klux Klan is sort of integrated within this town. There's some really great documentary type sort of interviews of local people, whatever it seems like, where they're like telling them sort of the reason why they don't like these black people. But then there's also the sort of black people's side where they do actually, it's not like they don't see their side at all. They do reach out to them, a couple times and sort of talk to them. There's a preacher scene. Oftentimes they are going in the community, but there's a great tension in the film, and there's a clear divide, and I think that adds to the thriller aspect of the film, and even the tension between the two characters of Willem Dafoe and Gene Hackman. And speaking of Gene Hackman, I thought the acting was really well done between him and Frances McDormand in particular, both real standout performances. I think that Gene Hackman does the intimidating thing that he's done in French Connection, and sort of the heat and tension between him and his partner, but also he has sort of a soft, sort of southern, lovable side about him, especially within the romance. Some sort of the innocent, gentle sort of guy that's just trying to navigate his way. It seems very awkward in a lot of ways, even though they're adults. It seems like sort of a first relationship, because the assumption is maybe this guy has been so consumed with his job, maybe he hasn't been worried about sort of any relationships, and for a while probably. So he's trying to get back into it and trying to figure the water out. Now I don't necessarily love that, well, I guess there's sort of different ways, I just want, in terms of the film and portraying sort of the guys as of the Klansmen being sort of these bad people, but then the women are sort of these docile kind of people that want to do the right thing. I think in this scenario, it's just this character, because she has sort of friends, black friends in the film, she has sort of a motive. But another thing I actually thought of this year's Black Klansman was really fantastic was when we saw sort of the woman as well, sort of being also very racist, while also being sort of docile, but still having those thoughts. I thought that movie was a unique angle. So after seeing that angle, looking at this one, I was kind of like, okay, maybe this is a little bit old-fashioned. So there are some moments that maybe don't necessarily hold up in that way. And then I also want to mention the cinematography. Really beautiful handheld shots, close-ups, moving camera. I thought felt very modern. There's some very stunning shots of sort of burning churches and violence, and sort of like I said, the documentary type depictions of certain news footages. It makes you feel like you're in it, and as well from being these amazing sort of Tarkovsky-esque sort of burning churches, kind of burning houses, kind of beautiful in the horror, unique aspect of it. But now we're at the end of the episode. Let's talk about sort of the central question of why it hasn't held up. We can look at the other 5 nominees. First was being Rain Man, which won for that year, which I think has a movie that's held up, and it's a movie that people like, and a great Tom Cruise performance and a great Dustin Hoffman, 2 stars that have sort of persisted today. So that stayed around. Dangerously Azonced, that has John Malkovich and Glenn Close's sort of standout performances, and is a well-regarded film. So I think that one's still held up, so I didn't choose that. The Accidental Tourist, which I almost chose, which is Lawrence Kasdan. He was on fire in the 80s. He'll be an interesting guy, but I want to save that conversation for maybe another film. And then what was the other one? It was here, let me see my notes. Working Girl, which is a classic sort of 80s romantic comedy that would never get nominated for Best Picture today, but still has some sort of key figures in it, and is definitely a product of the 80s, but I think I sort of look back on that with fondly, and at least I've heard of it. Mississippi Burning was a thriller that I'd very tangentially heard. I know some people I've read online that it actually just had a good life on TV, and that's where a lot of people saw it, but I think really the rewatchability is what hurts it. Why it doesn't hold up? I think it's because of the controversy that a lot of people think that it's not going to hold up today. But I also think because of it's really a tough watch. It's a hard subject matter to get into. It's not one that's easy to rewatch, especially in the 80s. And either your movie is a box office bomb and then maybe it becomes a cult hit on DVD or streaming, or it's a big, huge box office success and it's great. But these sort of mid-range, they do well, adult dramas. You watch them, you forget about them, they get some awards play, and you go on. There's sort of a format to them. They don't stay in the pop culture the way so these big blockbusters do, or even these films that did terrible at the time. Sometimes you want to do terrible at the time, and then find an audience to be like, hey, this is actually pretty good, or this is actually great, and they sort of and have that cult sort of fascination with it. But if it's sort of a $30 million movie that makes $50 million, $60 million, makes his money back, does well, gets some Oscar nominations, it's good sort of adult drama thriller with some good performances. There's a lot of those, unfortunately, and I think some people just don't gravitate towards them. And I think this film, I really enjoyed. I thought that they tackle some really poignant issues about the idea of the FBI and sort of the idea of what's their place and, how do they incorporate and going about things the wrong way and making things worse with good intentions and sort of that struggle. There's some great romance between Gene Hackman and Frances McDormand, and some beautiful cinematography that I really enjoyed overall. This sort of really tense thriller that is very well made. And I enjoyed it. Actually, I would recommend it to people. Maybe you would find everything, maybe you think it would be outdated. Yes, it has some outdated elements for sure. But that's what you're going to find with a lot of these older movies. There's always some element. But I think as a whole, it tells a very interesting story that I actually never really saw that side of in terms of sort of criticizing and being really critical. At least that's how I interpreted it, of these FBI agents. That's about it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the very first episode of Forgotten Oscar Films. Comment below. Let me know some of the improvements. Let me know some of the films maybe you want to see in upcoming years. Essentially, I'm going to start from 1988 and work backwards to 87 and so on and so forth. That should be a lot of fun. So next week, I believe, is Hope and Glory, I believe. Yeah, Hope and Glory should be the one next week. I'm still sort of working on that, trying to figure out what the best movie is. That should be an interesting one too. I haven't seen that one yet. So let me know. I'm open to criticism and sort of I want to shape this thing. And if you want to know more about the Oscars history, because you're an Oscars fan, let me know more of that. I can flesh that out a bit. That's about it, guys. I hope you guys enjoy the episode. And until next time, stay tuned.